Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of Threads Office Hours. I'm Xenia Chen, the founder of Threads, and this is a series where we take deep dives on all your questions and topics you want really answered. So I am very excited to be back after a hiatus. The fall winter season was super busy, and I'm really excited to be getting back into it and addressing a lot of your questions and discussing the topics that you really want to hear about. Some of you may know I went to Italy a few weeks ago. I love to visit our manufacturers there and just sort of, work on things face to face. I feel like it's so much easier. And also, it's always lovely to go to Italy. And I was initially going to do a little vlog on my trip, but then I actually thought about it and realized it's probably a lot more helpful for everyone for me to actually do a deep dive into our hosiery production process and maybe talk a little bit about the region and our manufacturer and just a little bit of, episode where you learn more about the behind the scenes process. So that's what I'm going to do today, and I'm so excited. So let's get started. So let's start off by talking a little bit about the actual region that our tights are made in. So our tights are made in a little region called Castel Goffredo in the northern area of Italy. And actually, this area is known to be the hosiery capital of the world. Like, it's very well known in the hosiery industry, and I'm sure a lot of you guys know about it as well because it's just such a well-known place, even though it's very small. So I actually asked our manufacturer, how did this small town become such a global powerhouse for hosiery? And essentially, the short of the story is many decades ago, there was one company who started making circular knitting machines in this region, and I'll talk to you a little bit about circular knitting machines a little bit later. And they were just very dominant in making circular knitting machines. And then from there, other parts of the hosiery supply chain naturally began to cluster around there. So if any of you know anything about economics, this is often known as the cluster effect in economics. Slowly over the years, lots of different companies like, dyeing companies, packaging companies started just clustering around that area. And one thing led to another, and now we have this entire ecosystem that lives in this tiny region in Italy. So to give you a better sense just how big this scale is, 90% of Italy's total hosiery exports come from this little region, Castel Goffredo. And when it comes to tights and pantyhose specifically, Italy holds about 20 to 25% of the total global market share, which matches China. So that's actually pretty crazy if you think about it. 90% of Italy's total exports come from this region, and then Italy in total makes up about 20 to 25% of the global tights and hosiery market. So very small, but very mighty. And just to tell you a little bit about our manufacturers before I dive into the production process, they are a family-owned and operated company, and they've been in business for over 50 years, which is pretty cool. They are Ecotech certified. They have the Standard 100 certification and also the STEP certification, which is actually very challenging to get. I'm not going to dive into it today, but you can look up these certifications, and it's actually quite impressive that they've been able to get both of them. So with that, let's dive into the hosiery production process. Okay, I am very excited to be walking you through the hosiery production process because when I first started Threads, I didn't know any of this. I was merely a wearer of tights, and I had zero industry knowledge, zero knowledge about textiles, knitting, all of that stuff. I was actually extremely unqualified to start a tights company, but I was just an avid wearer of tights, and I really wanted better tights for better value and, all those things. So the reason why I get so excited to talk about this is because after I learned about the production process and just how much work it takes to create one pair of tights, I feel like I appreciate tights so much more, and I'm so excited to kind of like transfer that knowledge to as many people as I can, because I really think that once you learn a little bit more about the process, like you do appreciate it a lot more. So that's a little preamble there, but basically the hosiery production process can be broken up into 5 different steps. So number 1 is the yarn sourcing. Number 2 is the knitting. Number 3 is sewing. Number 4 is dyeing and ironing. And number 5 is packaging. So I'm going to go through every single step and let's get into it. Okay, so number 1 is the yarn sourcing. So everything starts with the yarn. These are basically the raw ingredients that go into making a pair of tights. So everything begins with selecting the yarn. Every style and product we have has a unique blend of yarn that we've picked. And that combination essentially determines the look, the feel, the elasticity, the overall utility, and the purpose of the style. So our tights are pretty much always made with a blend of polyamide and elastane. So elastane, a lot of people know it by the name of lycra, but sometimes depending on the style, we have other yarn as well. So for example, our cashmere tights have also cashmere in it, and our lace thigh highs have lace in it. So we source a yarn based on what the style is going to be and what we want the end utility to be. So another example is if we wanted to make really shiny tights, they would probably have a higher percentage of elastane, because that's kind of what gives like the shiny and the stretchiness. Another great example is when I'm talking about our tone matching nude tights, so the sheer contour collection in the nude shades, I always talk about the reason they blend in so well with your natural skin color is because it uses a very specific blend of yarn. So what do I mean by that? I mean that we've selected the elastane in such a perfect concentration and percentage that it reflects like the inside light and the outdoor light, like the sunlight, in such a way that it sort of gives your legs like this sort of glow, where the light essentially bounces off the yarn, bounces off your legs, and gives it this like enhanced but natural look. It's very, very hard to do this. It takes a lot of iterating, and that's why I can't stop talking about our tone matching nude tights, because I think they're just so special. So those are a few examples of the different combinations of yarn and why yarn selection is so important. And in terms of where we source the yarn from, we source it from all around the world, mostly Italy, but we will look near and far for the perfect type of yarn. All right, so step 2 after we've selected the yarn is the knitting process. So this is when the tights actually get knit by machines. Our tights are knit on circular knitting machines, and the way that it's made is it's made in 2 tubes. So the machine goes around and it, knits one tube, and then it knits another tube, and then eventually they get sewn together. They get cut and sewn together, which is the next step. But the first step is they get knit in a tubular fashion. So whenever we talk about 3D construction, this is what we mean. The machines knit the yarn side to side and up and down, so you get that 360 all-way stretch. Each machine is programmed with the specific construction and what the design is going to be, or the pattern, and then the yarn gets fed through at multiple points in the machines, and the latch needles are used to basically tell the machine what to do, and at what point to knit it, and what point to stop and to skip and all that stuff. So this process is highly automated, but the actual programming takes a lot of iterating and time and effort. Especially when we're designing a new style, it is like hundreds of iterations to get it exactly right, because you're essentially trying to create a new set of instructions for the machine. But once that style gets designed and constructed, it is a pretty automated process. I also wanted to note that as I'm telling you about the production process, I am specifically talking about the production process of our hosiery. There is definitely going to be a variation and a whole range of different processes. So For example, depending on the brand you're buying, there could be, their knitting process could be completely different from ours. And I know that, there are machines out there that only do like vertical knitting or horizontal knitting. So I just wanted to note that this production process is what we do. And there's a lot of differences out there. But obviously it would take me many, many hours to talk about all of them. So just wanted to note that. So another thing about the knitting is that this is where the quality of manufacture really shows through. The more complex the construction, the more time and effort it takes to get it right. So for example, one of our biggest differentiators is our contoured control top, which is a control top that shows up in our contour style tights. So the sheer contour, opaque contour, contour lift shorts, light compression, contour tights. And we're so proud of this because basically we have included these targeted light compression bands on the areas around the brief and belly that you actually want, instead of, a lot of the stuff out there where control top basically means the entire brief area is tight, which is not really what we want. So, us creating this control top took a really, really long time, and we're so proud of it because it has taken a lot of iterating and effort. So it makes us so happy to hear to this day it's our #1 best-selling style that we have. So a great example of something that we're doing right now is we are working on developing a pair of maternity tights. And my goal for this pair of tights is to be the most comfortable and also functional maternity tights on the market. I am so focused on this right now, and it's taken years of iterating. Some of you may know that I started working on this when I was pregnant myself in 2023. Basically took a very long time. I wasn't really happy with, what we had, so we sort of delayed it, and we are currently working on it right now. And I'm so excited. I think we are very close, but I basically want something that's super comfortable, but also very functional and actually helps, support the belly a little bit. So stay tuned for that. But again, it just takes a lot of iterating, and you want to, get the exact knitting instructions and the knitting dimensions correct. But yeah, stay tuned for that. And I hope that gives a good overview of the knitting process. Okay, so the next step is sewing. So at the end of the last step, which was knitting, we have 2 tubes that are open-ended on both sides. And during the knitting process, we're about to put them together, sew them together. So in this stage, the toes are sewn closed. The top of each of the tubes are cut and then stitched together, and then the cotton gusset is also added during this step. And all this is done using sewing machines. So it's completely hand sewn, completely manual. Again, this is what we do, not necessarily every single brand out there. But this is really important for us because we really like having flat seams. And I know a lot of you out there do know the difference between flat seams and regular seams, but flat seams are a very specific, and I will say like European way of stitching that essentially makes the seams very comfortable for the wearer, and it lies very flat against your body. So the seams are also sewed on the toes, and I wanted to point out that I know a lot of people do not like the seams on the toes, but unfortunately this is just part of the process. Currently, there's not really a way for us to remove the seams on the toes because our tights are knitted in a circular process. So sorry to be the bearer of bad news there. So during the sewing step, if there's any sort of interesting patterns or add-ons to the tights, this is where it gets sewn. So for our thigh-high stockings, the lace gets sewn on during the stage. So step 4, dyeing. So dyeing and ironing was the step that surprised me the most when I first learned about it. It is an extremely detail-oriented and long process. I think in my head, I thought, you just dye the tights, you put them in some color, and like, ta-da. That is very much not the case. It is an extremely precise and scientific process that has a lot of checks throughout, which makes sense because getting the right color is super, super important. You obviously would not want to put on a pair of tights that is splotchy or maybe a slightly different shade at the top than it is on the bottom. So yeah, it totally makes sense why this process takes a very long time and is so scientific. So the steps within dyeing are basically finding the right shade. So for something like black, it's relatively easy. Although I'm sure a lot of you color fanatics know that there are so many different shades of black out there. But anyway, something like black is relatively easier, but something like nude or our varying shades of nude, that's a lot more difficult. So not only do we want to develop nude shades that look really great on skin, but we also want to develop shades that look good on skin and in various different lights. So whenever we test out a new color, we actually test it under various different lights. So here's a little photo of us, testing under like grocery lights, sunlight. There's like a whole range of different lights that we want the product to look good under. So in order for us to really get a color we like, it's a lot of testing. We use a lot of fabric swatches and it takes time. But this is also a really fun part because it's colorful and you get to, sort of go back and forth and see all the possibilities. So another test that we do is we do a moisture wicking test. So we want our tights to be moisture wicking to some extent. So for example, if you're in the summer wearing them and you're a little bit sweaty, we want the tights to moisture wick. Obviously it's, not like a workout product, but we want them to have some sort of moisture wicking properties. So after we test the color swatch, we also put these swatches through a moisture test. So once the specific color formula is set, the dyes essentially go through a heated tank and it looks a little bit like an industrial oven. So the tights are folded and placed in what looks to be like a large laundry bag, like the laundry bags that we recommend you wash your tights in. And then it gets put in this dyeing oven where the dyes are passed through. And we also put them through different treatments. So one of them is like a softener, so it makes sure that the tights feel really nice on your skin. And another one is to make sure that the color doesn't bleed as soon as you wash them. And again, I want to say we do everything we can to ensure high quality because we don't want our tights to be something that you just wear once. We want you to wash them. We want you to use them over and over again, and we want the color to look really good on the 10th wash, just as it does on the package. So it's really important that we take extra care during this process. So after the tights are dyed, they are dried in industrial dryers, and then they're stretched onto leg molds, and they go through a steam press, and it basically helps them shrink to its final shape. This step basically locks in the dimensions and give the tights their smooth finish. I also wanted to mention that we have a lot of quality control measures throughout this entire process. It's not just one step, but we actually have it in between every single step, if not multiple times within every step. So for example, I've included this video of a stretch and pressure test during the knitting process. So every style has a benchmark that it needs to hit in terms of like stretch and durability. And this machine essentially helps us make sure that it is indeed the case when the products come out of the knitting machine. This is also a form/fit test during the knitting phase. So again, it's just like another way to make sure that the size actually matches what we want it to be. And as I've mentioned before, here are some examples of the dye tests that we do. And of course, if there are any defects that does not get placed back into the batch, a lot of the tights that don't meet the requirements, we use the fabric as scraps for color testing and all that. Okay, so the final step after the tights are dyed and ironed and dried is the packaging step. So this definitely varies depending on our product. Our tights are packed, folded over a cardboard and within a plastic sleeve, and this essentially helps us get the tights from us to you in pristine condition. And the tights are also sanitized before they're packaged, which is why we are so strict about, returns and exchanges. Once they're sanitized, we are just very, very strict about making sure that they are, the best possible condition and meet our hygiene standards when they get to you. So another question I've gotten over the years from some people is, why is our packaging so bare bones? And I actually have addressed this in a prior office hours episode. I'll link that, but I thought this is a good opportunity to talk about it again. So my mission has always been to bring really high-end, high-quality hosiery at a reasonable price, something that I think is good value. And when I think about all the 5 manufacturing steps, I'm definitely not going to cut corners on any of the first 4. I think, I want to use the best methods, use the best machines, take the extra time and effort to really just source the best materials to create the best tights. So then the only step where I think makes sense to create value is sort of finding more economical ways to package the product, right? Because at the end of the day, you're going to get the tights in the package and you're probably going to throw out the package. So I want to be investing in the tights, not the packaging. The only thing I really cared for about the packaging was that it gets to you in a safe and in good condition, right? I want the tights to come to you like not damaged, not wet or anything like that. So that was pretty much the only thing I cared about when it came to packaging. I think most people would be very surprised if they knew just how much premium packaging costs. So our packaging, which is just our tights around a flat piece of cardboard and a plastic sleeve, is doing its job, which is protecting the tights from our factory to you. And as a result, we are passing that value back on to you. So those are the 5 steps that we take to produce a pair of your tights. I hope that was really helpful. I hope that was interesting and that you learned something. I personally always learn lots of new things every single time I visit the manufacturer. There's always like new processes that they use, new technologies, and we're always on the hunt to improve and to utilize like the new technologies and the products, the raw materials out there to produce even better tights. So again, I hope that was interesting for you. If you have any questions, please drop them in the comments and I will try to answer them. I love educating people about this topic because I think it really makes you appreciate the tights more. So thank you so much for tuning in. I really appreciate it. And if you have any questions for future office hours, please let me know. I will pop the question link in the comments, but you can also just comment and I will answer them in a future episode of Office Hours. Thanks so much, and I hope you guys have a great day.